In the vast silence of space, radio waves travel unchallenged. They carry the voices of astronauts, the beeps of machines, and sometimes things that were never meant to be heard. For decades, NASA has been the symbol of human achievement. Rockets soaring through the sky, flags planted on distant moons. But behind the glowing headlines and neatly archived footage, there's a darker narrative. Whispers of audio recordings that were scrubbed, redacted, or simply vanished. These are the lost tapes, and what's on them has fueled one of the most enduring space mysteries of all time. It begins in the early days of the Apollo program. Between 1969 and 1972, NASA sent a dozen men to the moon. Publicly, the missions were triumphs, but not everything the astronauts experienced made it into the televised broadcasts. In fact, only a fraction of the communication between mission control and the crew was ever aired. The rest, thousands of hours, was recorded and stored away. Some of these recordings have resurfaced, but others, they're still missing. Not misplaced, not misfiled. Gone. In 2006, NASA officially admitted it could not locate the original SSTV broadcast tapes of the Apollo 11 moon landing, the highest quality video ever recorded of that historic moment. Instead, what we saw on television was a lower resolution conversion captured off a monitor. NASA said the tapes were probably erased and reused to save money during a time of budget cuts. But why would the most important footage in human history be taped over like an old TV show? It doesn't sit right. And that's where the whispers begin. Some former NASA contractors and technicians claimed they heard things during live feeds that never made it into the public transcripts. Strange noises, unexplained silence, conversations suddenly cut off. During Apollo 10, just months before the first moon landing, astronauts reported hearing what they described as outer space music, a strange whistling sound that echoed through their headsets while orbiting the far side of the moon. Since they were out of radio contact with Earth, this music couldn't have come from Houston. NASA later explained the sound as interference between the VHF radios in the lunar and command modules. Technically plausible, but even astronaut Eugene Cernan, who flew on Apollo 10 and later walked on the moon, said in interviews that the sounds were weird and unlike anything he'd ever heard.
What makes the Apollo 10 incident even more unsettling is that it was never broadcast or made public at the time. The recordings were buried in NASA archives and under-released decades later, prompting the question, what else is hidden in those archives? Fast forward to the Apollo 11 mission. During the historic landing, a strange gap appears in the audio between Armstrong's report, "The Eagle has landed," and the next set of transmissions. A few seconds of silence, then an unusual shift in tone. According to transcripts uncovered years later, Armstrong and Aldrin observed a light or object on the crater's edge watching them. These transcripts are not part of the public broadcast. They were reportedly picked up by radio operators using VHF intercept equipment in Australia and Spain, listening in on the raw feed. One of them, Otto Binder, a former NASA engineer turned science writer, claimed in a 1970 article that anonymous radio hams with their own VHF receiving facilities that bypassed NASA's broadcasting outlets picked up this exchange between the astronauts and mission control. "What's that over there?" "These babies are huge, sir. Enormous. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. We are being watched." NASA has never confirmed the authenticity of this transcript, but Binder was not the only one to report on it. Years later, former NASA contractor Maurice Chatelain claimed that Armstrong had indeed seen 2 UFOs on the moon, but was ordered to keep quiet. Chatelain said that NASA knew about these encounters and even had a protocol for dealing with them. He was later dismissed as a conspiracy theorist, but his claims persist in underground forums and alternative history circles to this day. And then there's the mystery of the Skylab tapes. Skylab was America's first space station, launched in 1973. During the mission, the astronauts reported hearing rhythmic knocking sounds on the outside of the module, mechanical, deliberate, and without explanation. These sounds were recorded, but when the audio logs were later reviewed by outside analysts, the relevant sections had been cut. Why would NASA remove recordings of unexplained noises in space? Was it to avoid panic? Or were the astronauts experiencing something that defied explanation? Even more puzzling is the story of the STS-48 space shuttle mission in 1991. During this mission, a live NASA video feed showed several fast-moving objects suddenly changing direction in Earth's orbit. One object seemed to react to what looked like a bright flash from the planet's surface. NASA claims these were merely ice particles being pushed by gas bursts from the shuttle. But physicists watching the video pointed out that ice particles don't suddenly zigzag in vacuum conditions. The original footage was mysteriously pulled, and subsequent press conferences refused to acknowledge the anomaly.
But the true heart of this mystery lies in the vast, unscanned, unprocessed audio archives still sitting in NASA's facilities. According to official estimates, over 13,000 hours of Apollo mission tapes remain uncatalogued. In a 2012 interview, archivist Nancy McGovern confirmed that many of the analog tapes are deteriorating and will be lost forever unless digitized. One has to ask, if these tapes are so unimportant, why not just release them? And if they contain nothing but routine chatter, why are researchers still denied access to certain sections? In 2019, a group of researchers filed a Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) request to access Apollo 17 mission audio that contained an unusual period of static and high-frequency interference. NASA responded that the request could not be fulfilled due to, quote, missing data. No further explanation was given. And then there's the incident of the Black Knight satellite. Though often dismissed as myth, declassified NASA images from the STS-88 mission appear to show an unidentified object in Earth orbit. Some believe it's a 13,000-year-old alien probe. Others think it's space debris. NASA insists it's just a thermal blanket. But strangely, after these images were released, the original mission audio involving the crew discussing the object disappeared from public archives. Whispers began to circulate. Was NASA editing reality? Were astronauts encountering things that didn't fit the official story? And if so, who decides what we're allowed to know? Former astronauts like Gordon Cooper and Edgar Mitchell openly spoke about their belief in extraterrestrial life. Cooper even claimed to have seen UFOs while in orbit. Mitchell said that information was being withheld at the highest levels and that we are not alone. NASA distanced itself from their remarks. But the question lingered. Why would men trained in science and spaceflight risk their reputations to make such claims? Could the lost tapes be hiding something so unsettling that even in the age of information, we're not ready to hear it? Could they contain evidence, not evidence of aliens necessarily, but of something outside the narrow frame of our understanding? NASA has made incredible discoveries, but it's also a government agency. And like any institution of power, it decides what gets shared and what stays buried. When you combine politics, budgets, and Cold War secrecy, you get a perfect storm of concealment and control. So what's on the lost tapes? Maybe nothing. Maybe just static and silence. Or maybe a voice, a signal, a transmission from something or someone not listed in the mission plan. Until the tapes are found, we're left only with questions. But remember this, in space, there's no noise unless something makes it, and someone doesn't want you to hear it.